Statistics. Frequency polygon. Things you should know already. You should know how to calculate midpoints, plot coordinates, and read graphs. Some key terms to note. The midpoint. It's an estimated value that is halfway between two values. Frequency is the amount of time something repeats or how often something occurs. Coordinates. Coordinates is a pair of x and y values that tells us where something is located. And usually in this case, we're talking about where a point is located. Here are some notes. A frequency polygon. A frequency polygon is a pictorial representation of the shape of a frequency distribution. They are especially helpful for comparing sets of data. To construct a frequency polygon, we use the midpoints and the frequency to display that data. Here's a question. It says, the table below shows the amount of time spent in minutes 43 men take to cut their hair at a barber shop. And here we see the time in minutes and the ranges and the number of men which fall in each range. So here we can understand that 7 men take between 100 minutes to 104 minutes to get their hair cut. The question is, we are to draw a frequency polygon to represent the information. Use 2 centimeters to represent 5 minutes on the horizontal axis, which is the x-axis running from left to right, and 2 centimeters to represent 5 men on the vertical axis running north to south. Now remember, to draw our frequency polygon, we need 2 bits of information. You remember what we need? We need the frequency and we need the midpoint. So we now need to calculate the midpoint for each of these class intervals. Do you remember how to calculate the midpoint? Let's take a try at it. So to calculate our midpoint, remember the midpoint is halfway between each class interval. So I need to find halfway between 100 and 104. To do that, I'm going to have 100 plus 104, get an answer, then divide it by 2. Then let me draw for my calculator to show what that looks like. So 100 plus 104 gives me 204, and I'm dividing that by 2. So I get 102. So 102 is my midpoint, my estimated midpoint for this class interval. Can you try the next one? So for the next midpoint, we will have to add 105 here to 109 here. The answer we get, we're going to divide it by 2. So 105 plus 109 will give us 214, and I'm dividing that by 2. I end up with 107. And the last one, what do you get? Which two numbers would you have to add, then divide by 2 to get the midpoint for the last row of data? Well, it would be 110 plus 114. What does that look like in my calculator? 110 plus 114 will give me 224. Then I'm dividing that by 2, which will give me 112. Now on our graph where we're going to draw our frequency polygon, remember we need two things: our midpoint, which is our x value, and our frequency, which is our y value. So my midpoint is my x value, and my frequency is my y value. Now I need to write them together, x and y. So my first coordinate for the point I would plot is x first and then y. So I would have 102 along with 7. Afterwards, I will have 107 along with 21. Can you guess what the last one would be? It would be 112 with 15. So remember now, all my x values are my midpoints and they're on the horizontal axis. All my y values are my frequencies and they're on the vertical axis. Now we're almost ready to plot our graph of the frequency polygon. There, I've already drawn my L on my graph paper. What I need to do now is to put in the scales and label each axis. Now remember, where they meet, the value is 0. This is my x-axis, so I'm going to label it x-axis. And the scale for the x-axis, according to the question, is 2 centimeters to represent 5 minutes. So I'm going to put 2 centimeters down here, so 5 minutes. So this means that I have minutes on my x-axis. So now for every 2 centimeters, I'm going to have 5 minutes. So what I'm going to do is to put out my 2 centimeter marks along my x-axis. So starting at 0, I'm measuring 2 centimeters. 1, 2, 1, 2. So I noticed that 1 centimeter is one of these little blocks. So every 2 centimeters or 2 blocks will be 2 centimeters. So I'm going to have one more here. Skip one more here, skip this one more here, skip this one more here, skip this one more here. So then I would have put in my 2 centimeter marks. According to the question, for my y-axis, it's a similar scale. I am to use 2 centimeters to represent 5 men on the vertical axis. So every 2 centimeters should represent 5 men. So I'm going to put in my 2 centimeter marks. 1, 2, 1 centimeter, 2 centimeter, 1 centimeter, 2 centimeter. I'm going to put in some more. 1 centimeter, 2 centimeter, 1, 2, 1, 2. And this is my y-axis. So I'm going to label it y-axis. And the scale is 2 centimeters to 5 men. Now I'm ready to plot my frequency polygon. I'm going to have to look back at the information. Now look at this. Remember, every 2 centimeters is 5 units. So this would have been 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. This would have been 40. Here would have been 45. Right? But if I look on my frequency table, my x value, it starts at 102. How am I going to put 102? I'm out of space. What I can do is to use a break. This is what the break looks like. So the break signifies that I'm not starting my drawing from 0. So what I would have to do is to erase all of these numbers and replace them with a number that can go a number before this, right? So if I was to figure out what x value would come before this, when I look, the difference between 102 and 107 is 5. And the difference between 107 and 112 is also 5. So if I'm supposed to take 5 from 102, I'm going to get 97. So 97 would have been the previous x value, which would be our midpoint, right? So I need to start somewhere around 97. And because I'm going up by 5, I would start my graph at 95. So I'm going to come here and put 95. And remember, each 2 centimeters are going up is going to be 5. So 95 plus 5 is going to give us what? 100. 100 plus 5 is going to give us what? 105. 105 plus 5 is going to give us what? 110. Then we're going to get 115, 120, 125, and so forth. Do we have all? Do you see? These numbers can actually fall on our graph now. So that is how we use the break. We're starting at 0, but there's a whole heap of space in between them. But we can't use it because we're wasting our graph paper. So that is why we use a break to show that there's a whole heap of space between 0 and where our graph actually starts from. Now I can put in my y value axis numbers. So now remember, our y axis is dealing with number of men. And remember, the scale is 2 centimeters to 5 men. So starting at 0, 2 centimeter will give me 5 men here. 2 more centimeter, 5 more men. So 5 plus 5 is 10. And I'm going up by 5. 10 plus 5 is 15. 15 and 5, 20. 20 and 5, 25. And one more. 25 and 5 will give us 30. Now we're really ready to plot our graph. Now let's look. If we're going to look at the previous midpoint that would exist, it would have been 97. And the frequency at that point doesn't exist, so it would have been 0. So the first point I would plot is 97 with 0. Now I need to locate where 97 could be. I know it's somewhere between 95 and 100. But where exactly? Remember what to do? So what we can do to determine where exactly 97 is to count the amount of space and divide it by our scale. So space divided by scale. How much space is between 95 and 100 on our graph? Let me zoom it in for you so that you can see. Great. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And the scale is 2 centimeters to 5. So I'm dropping my 5 here. 5 into 10 goes 2 times. So this is telling me every 2 little lines or every 2 space will give me 1. So 95, 1, 2, here will be 96. 1, 2, here will be 97. And let's check it to see if we actually go up to 100 when we continue counting by 2. 1, 2, 98. 1, 2, 99. 1, 2, 100. So we're looking for 97 on our graph. And the number that it's matched with right here is 0. So let me zoom out. So we found our 97 and we're matching it with 0. So it's right on this line right here. So we're drawing our frequency polygon and it must touch the x-axis. Next point that we're going to plot. 102 along with 7. So I'm looking for 102 on the x-axis. So 102 is somewhere between 100 and 105. Now we said that every 2 space represents 1 unit on our x-axis. Let me zoom up again. So starting at 100, 1, 2, this will give me 101. 1, 2, this will give me 102. So I found where 102 is. Now I need to match this 102 with its y value, 7. So I now need to find where would 7 lie on my y-axis. 7 would be somewhere between 5 and 10. But on which line or which space exactly is 7? Do you remember what to do? Space divided by scale. How much space is between 5 and 10? Count them with me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And what's our scale on the y-axis? Remember? It's 5. So we're having the same scale on the x as well as the same scale on the y. So 5 into 10 goes 2 times. So this means every 2 space will give us 1. So starting at 5, counting 2 space up, 1, 2, this will be 1. 5 plus 1 will give us 6. I don't want 6, I want 7. So I need to add 2 more spaces. 1, 2 will give us 1 more, which is 7. So our 7 is right here on this line. Now I need to make sure that I draw my lines. So I'm matching 102. So I'm drawing a vertical line here from the 102. And I'm matching that with the 7 that I just found. So I'm drawing this horizontal line now to touch that 102. So it touches it right here. Right here, so. Right? So this is 102 with 7. Not doing so bad. Let us now plot the next point. 107 with 21. So I'm looking for 107, and 107 is somewhere between 105 and 110. Remember, using our scale, every 2 space is 1 unit. So starting from 105, 1, 2, this will give me 106. I don't want 106, I want 107. So I need to go 2 more spaces. 1, 2, this will give us the 107. So I'm going to draw my vertical line from 107 going upwards. Just like so. There you go. Then now, what number on the y-axis does my 107 on the x go with? There you go, 21. So I need to search for 21 on my y-axis. 21 is somewhere between 20 and 25. Now remember, every 2 space on our y-axis is also 1 unit. So starting at 20, 1, 2, this will tell me where 21 is. So I need to draw a horizontal line now from 21 to touch the 107 line that I just drew. Like so. Do you see that? So it's right here. So I'm going to write my coordinates 107 with 21. Not finished yet. I have some more points to plot. Next point is 112 with 15. Where would 112 fall? Between 110 and 115. Now, question to you. On which line would it fall? Where would the 112 fall? Is it this one? This one? This one? This one? Or this one? Which one? Remember, on our x-axis, every 2 space is equal to 1 unit now. So, looking for 112, which is between 110 and 115. 1, 2 will give us 1, so this is 111. 1, 2 will give us 1 more, which is 112. So we found where 112 is. So I'm going to draw a vertical line from my 112 to go straight up. Now, what number is matched with my 112? 15. So I need to find 15 on my y-axis and to draw that line to come across to touch this 112. So it's right there. No trouble finding that one. Right here. So I'm going to label my coordinates 112 with 15. Now remember, this is a frequency polygon. So it must start off touching the x-axis and it must end touching the x-axis. But which number must we use, or which coordinates are we going to use to finish this polygon off? Let's look back at our frequency table. Now, remember how we got this 97 and the 0? We thought about some imaginary class interval that would exist before this 102. We now need to think of an imaginary midpoint that would exist after this 112. So what we could do is follow the pattern. 7, 2, 7, 2. What should come next? 7. And then we're dealing with 100 and the teens, right? So it would have been 117. Or let's say there's no regular pattern that you can see. Well, if you add 5 to 102, you get 107. If you add 5 to 107, you end up getting 112. If we add 5 to 112, we will end up getting 117 as well. And because it doesn't really exist in our table, the frequency would be 0. So the next point that we'd have to plot is 117 along with 0. So I start with 0 and I end with 0. So on my graph, I need to look for 117. 117 is somewhere between 115 and 120. Remember now that every 2 space is equal to 1 unit on my x-axis because of space divided by scale. So now, 1, 2 from 115 will give us 116. 1, 2 from 116 will give us 1 more, which is 117. So 117 is right here. And remember, the frequency at that point would have been 0 because it didn't exist. So I started with 0 and ended with 0 as my frequency. Now I can say that I am finished. So what I can do now is to use my ruler and to draw my frequency polygon. So using my ruler and drawing straight lines with my frequency polygon. There you go. Coming here as well. So I'm basically connecting the dots. There you go. And my frequency polygon is complete. The only thing I'm missing is a nice title. Now, my title must reflect the data. So it's time in minutes to cut here. So I can say for my title, frequency polygon showing time spent to cut hair. And then that would have completed that.